And a topic that caught the attention of the community was that of your favorite artist, François Froideval. Um,
Well, I'm always careful in pronouncing French names because I usually get it wrong.
I need to put on like a French accent because I probably would sound so
Right.
much better if I did that.
And I have a terrible, terrible French accent. But yeah, so I would say my favorite graphic novel artist, along with Juan Gimenez. And maybe I said that wrong too, but Juan Gimenez, pretty mind blowing. Unfortunately, died recently.
Oh, sorry to hear that. So
Just that was the Meta Barons series that Juan did.
cool. Um, so I know that you have a large collection of his work, and there have been a few comments that he's not perhaps an artist in a broad sense, but instead a comic scenarist. I'm not really sure what the differences are. Maybe it's something that you can elaborate on. And also, there was mention of a publisher, but we didn't actually say who the publisher is and what that was referring to. So maybe, we can talk a little bit more about that, tell the community how that conversation came about, what Francois was potentially going to do, why it had to be him, and, all of that behind the scenes information.
Sure. Where do we start?
Let's start on the topic of graphic novel artists and your favorites. Sure. Yeah.
So I'll give you a little perspective on this. When I came out of the New York art world, in my early 20s and then headed to California, starting to get into film, I had this idea that had been imprinted on me, kind of a artist with a capital A is how they would say it, where it has to be, all these different things, this different intellectual integrity and commentary on whatever, the world, what artists do. And I had written off comic book art as something that I liked as a kid. And I just wrote it off. And then I got to LA and I started working finally at Rhythm and Hughes. And I was working with this producer, older guy who had worked on lots of things, including Blade Runner. And he told me that when Ridley Scott, and I had just, I was kind of fresh in the effects film world. And he told me, he said, when Ridley Scott came in with the storyboards for Blade Runner, it right in the beginning, he said it wasn't storyboards. It was all cutouts from comic books. It was all just, I want this angle here. I want this shot here. I like this kind of lighting. And a lot of it was European graphic novels. And it dawned on me in that minute. I was like, wait a minute. Why was Ridley and other people had told me, different film directors, they were like always every week in a comic book shop collecting new stuff. And so I went back to comics and I started looking. I realized it had grown up a lot since I was a kid, to where you had now Frank Miller, kind of intensity, lots of, it was becoming mature content. And I started looking at the European stuff more. So I'm talking, this is still in the 80s. It's like 1987 or about probably 88 or 89. And now I'm starting to go back and re-familiarize with, when I was a kid, comics were really kind of comics. And then there was some incredible artists like Bernie Wrightson, or, did the Frankenstein black and white ink series. It's like masterpiece. And I started realizing that comics was the place where artists were able to start expressing their ideas and IPs in ways that could actually reach a market. But there's a lot of artistry. I mean, if you look at Alan Moore, we wouldn't say he's not a serious writer, but he's writing for comic books. And so what happened in Hollywood is that things that would become movies previous to games or biographies, something like that, was typically coming out of history or out of fiction or out of mostly novels, if it wasn't a fresh new creation, and or classic fables or something like that. It was picking off from the history. But as time went on, we started to see things like Frank Miller's comments, cartoons. What was the black and white one with Marv?
Sin City.
Sin City, yeah. Like, this is crazy stuff. Or 300, And what happened was Hollywood all of a sudden in the 90s started picking up on the new lowest price place where a creator can manifest their stories and art in the context of a narrative was in the comic book space, because they were still relative to the cost of, even cutting an album or something at a high-end studio. It was, way cheaper than making television, way cheaper than making movies. And so then comic books started getting all tied up and Hellboy, I remember when that was brand new and how it transcended into, many mediums. So I see comic book artists, particularly great ones. Now, if we look at like Juan Gimenez from a design level, with the Meta Baron series, every page you see so much wealth of really smart production design, ship design, suits, fashion design, world design, creature design. Every shot is like a world that's completely realized in those paintings. And he was just astounding. On the side of like dark fantasy, kind of mature fantasy, that's where Froideval, if I'm saying it correctly, that's where
we can just say François.
François, there we go. François. So with François, that the series of graphic novels they did, sometimes writing, sometimes visuals, I think they're kind of closer to like film directors in that they're pulling together images and a story. Now, then there's the simple stuff, which is kind of like, for kids, the Archies or whatever. And then you get into some really sophisticated stuff. So when it's in the sophisticated realm, I don't put let's say my view of art with a capital A changed a lot. And I started seeing more valid, really high quality expression taking place in other mediums that I didn't expect it to happen. And particularly graphic novels was one of them. And like I said, like if you look through the Meta Baron series, I mean, where else do you see so much density of sci-fi, awesome production design, and crazy high concept stories? And that, to me, that's artistry. And in his case, I think it was pretty relevant stuff. In Francois's case, I think it was sort of wonderful escapism into sort of mythological world of, good and evil and all these characters in between that swear, that have sex, that it's mature, crazy stuff, right? So I just love that stuff. And I never thought any downgrade of that medium in comparison to any other medium, and in fact, their output is like astoundingly high when you look at, how much they were able to produce over the years. And most of that was before digital. So anyway, that's I guess, a little long-winded excuse. So I'm going to shorten my answers this time. I promise you, Dan.
That's okay. And we also mentioned in that episode about a publisher. And at the time, we were talking about Microids being the publisher of Soulstorm, but the publisher that was actually involved in these conversations was the parent company of Microids.
Parent company of Microids, and it was Media Participations. And they own a number of companies, and then they also are a huge publisher of, one of those companies. And I don't have it all in front of me, but they published an awful lot of graphic novels, really high quality stuff coming out of France.
Okay, so if you're interested in that and finding more about media participations, there'll be a link in the Discord chat discussion, and you can go and find out all that information. Thank you very much for the clarification on that, Lorne. Right.